Looking to do more with your electric drive? Volvo Recharge plug-in hybrids travel further in pure mode. That means more scenic routes, more spontaneous adventures. Volvo Recharge plug-in hybrids do more on electric. Visit volvocars.com/US.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/SBO. Terms and conditions apply.
So in those conversations, there was a story that was going around that the reason why it was happening was because that the building had originally been a hospital, and that we were in the morgue of that hospital, where the rack room had been where they kept the coolers and everything. And I was like, okay, sure, that makes sense. These are the souls of the people who had passed away. And that story stuck in my head for all of those years. So when I started doing research for Alaska's Mysterious Triangle, and I want to write about this, of course. So I dive into the research of the building because I want to get all my, facts straight and all my ducks in a row and everything. And I'd come to find out that building was never a hospital. It was built exactly what it was being used for, and that was command. So then it's like, okay, I'm scratching my head. Why in the world are we seeing these shadows down there? And so I can only speculate now. And of course, I can't go back and investigate and research because they'd never let me in there these days. But again, we're talking energy of the Alaska Triangle, and then we're talking about everything else that's there as far as energy and equipment and all that. I think we were witnessing some sort of time slip, that we were seeing, shadows of personnel from the past, maybe personnel from the future, maybe even ourselves, this sort of thing. Because there's no other rhyme or reason for these things to have been there.
The history of our Earth is so different from what we can imagine.
Enjoy the journey.
The Smithsonian, if they found out about a large skeleton somewhere, was to go get it.
I'm going to assume at least one person is right, because if one person's right, it busts the paradigm. It all goes back to the fallen cherub. And the problem with the modern day church, they have a very truncated view of the supernatural.
This backdrop that's just pregnant with all kinds of meaning associated with this Mount Hermon event.
Welcome to Blurry Creatures.
And this guy defects from the kingdom. That's a big deal.
It's blurry in Bermuda, but we're not going to the tropics today. We're getting into the strange phenomena that happens up north, Alaska.
Well, this is opposite of Jimmy Buffett land. Yeah, we are putting away our Hawaiian shirts, been putting on our long underwear.
You have a great selection of Hawaiian shirts. I know you do,
dude. I have a fleet, and I think my wife hates most of them. Actually, I call them party shirts because, if we're going on vacation or we have a party to go to, like a barbecue, it's party shirt time.
Well, let me know. I need some party shirts. If you ever need to get rid of them, just
I know a guy. I know a guy. We'll get you lined up. No, but this is
we're going north.
We're going north. This is fun. We've had a couple episodes about Alaska, but nothing specific on the Alaskan Triangle. And this is going to be a great. Mike Ricksecker joins us. You may recognize his voice and his face from a myriad of TV shows, whether it be the History Channel or Discovery Channel. He's done a lot of work around this. Written a number of books. And he actually was in the Air Force stationed in Alaska, where he really kind of got interested in this topic. But this is one of those things. It's a triangle. These are these anomalies that exist all over the Earth, where weird stuff happens. Planes disappear, people disappear, and it's like it's a equal parts David Paulides and equal parts Ashton Forbes and wormholes and portals and equal parts Skinwalker Ranch. Right? It's this really bizarre place where you've got tons of cryptids, creatures, people disappearing, planes disappearing, and a bunch of really odd, outside of the realm of normal, paranormal type of experiences happen in this massive triangle, which Mike says is the size of California.
Yeah, it's blurry up in Alaska, and then it's not really an easy episode to kind of encompass in one round. It's going to take many. Feels like the kind of podcast to take multiple episodes to cover all the high strangeness up in Alaska, but Mike's going to be here to help us walk through some of the history of the weirdness that goes on up there. So if you want to become a member of the show, blurrycreatures.com/members, support what we're doing here, help us keep the blur going, and you get all sorts of perks for being a member, and maybe, just maybe, you'll get to wear a party shirt with Luke one day if you...
We make it to the Bermuda Triangle. We go. We're only doing that if we go down south. So
yeah, maybe we'll go to the Bermuda Triangle, and it's that where
BlurryCon 11 in Bermuda.
Yeah, isn't
bring
that
bring
where
your grass skirt, mate. The Giants, man. Yeah,
the Giants of Aruba, right?
Aruba.
Maybe we'll do an Aruba trip. We
Aruba,
don't
Jamaica.
know.
Yeah, we want to take you.
We want to take you. Key Largo, Montego, baby.
Why don't we go? To Jamaica off the Florida Keys?
Oh, yeah.
Let's get Mike on here before this goes
all right,
completely off the
this
rails.
is getting real weird.
Yeah.
Real weird. All right, so...
Thanks for supporting the show. Thanks for sharing the show. As Nate said a number of times, like this show is growing because you folks are sharing it. So thanks for sharing this, texting it, and telling your friends about what's going on here in the Blurryverse. Excited to see all you guys in the fall at BlurryCon. I'm excited for you to hear and learn a bit about the wilds of Alaska here with Mike Ricksecker.
All right, welcome to the podcast, author, researcher, filmmaker, Mike Ricksecker. You've done so many things on TV for like the History Channel and Travel Channel, talking about the Alaska Triangle, and we were just talking about that yesterday with actually a member story. We got into it. One of this guy was a cop up there for 25 years, and he was just telling us all the paranormal stuff he experienced. And one of the main things he said was he drove into this like sphere of translucent bubble. And when he drove into, the temperature dropped 30 degrees, and he didn't know what was going on. But there's so many things up there, and we were joking with Hugh Newman about this. There's like an underground pyramid in Alaska,
allegedly,
or
the Black
allegedly.
Pyramid. Yeah, Hugh was on a show. This is one of our favorite things to rib Hugh about because he's been on the show a few times. But Nate asked him about it sort of offhanded, like, "What the Black Pyramid?" And he goes in his English, in the only way he could do it in English. He's like, "Mate, they just tell me what to say. I don't know anything about that." And we're like, "What? You're on the show?" He's like,
yeah.
I don't know. You're like, okay, well, moving on. What to the next subject?
No, and that's kind of the deal sometimes too. And first of all, Luke and Nate, thanks for having me on. When it comes to some of these topics, some of it is really niche, and they want you on these shows because there's some expertise that you have that they want you to speak about, but then they're like, well, can you talk to us about these other topics? Because they want not just one person to speak on it, they want multiple people. So sometimes they will just say, okay, here's a story, can you speak on it? And it's like, sure, I can recite that.
Right. Yeah. So that was the Hugh thing, but we've got you here, and thanks again for being here, Mike. Like one of the when we were looking into the things that, weird stuff and weird things that happen in the Alaskan Triangle. I guess I actually saw you on a show, and that's why I wrote it down. I was like, I got to see if I can find Mike.
Yeah.
But welcome to Blurry Creatures. Great to have you on. You've written a bunch of books. You've written about the Alaskan Triangle. You've written about time travel, shadow people, all things that kind of fit in the realm of things we talk about, which is really cool.
Yeah.
But we have a tradition here. We're 240 plus episodes in, and we ask everybody. Our show started out talking about Bigfoot. First 10 episodes were about Bigfoot. What is Bigfoot? And trying to figure out, we could call Bigfoot the gateway drug because it's apparently it's like owning chickens. All of a sudden you're into all the conspiracies, right? So we ask everybody from the Bigfoot people to the scientists, to theologians, to everyone, what their thoughts are on Bigfoot. So Mike, what are your thoughts on Bigfoot, if you have any?
Yeah. So, okay, your gateway drug was Bigfoot. Mine was more ghost hauntings, all that. And I am an experiencer. But I have not had any specific experiences with Bigfoot. But I do believe that there is some sort of phenomenon that is occurring out there that people are witnessing. And I can't deny their experiences at all. And I have several friends that are Bigfoot, Sasquatch researchers. In fact, on my podcast, Connecting the Universe, 2 recent episodes were exactly that topic. So even though I haven't had my own experiences with it, it's research that I am certainly open to, especially when we start talking about the possibilities that perhaps Bigfoot or Sasquatch or skunk ape or whichever one we're talking about, maybe they are some sort of interdimensional beings, which plays right into my realm. And so, and why not? Why wouldn't they be? Just because a being is interdimensional doesn't mean they have to look like us. They could look like all kinds of different things. So looking like a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot is, certainly within the realm of possibility, especially when you start talking about, and I just posted a blog article on this morning about portals out in the wilderness, and one of the questions is, is Bigfoot or Sasquatch using portals to move in and about out throughout our reality? And some of these people that go missing in the woods, we have to start asking the questions, where did they go? Do they step into something? They step through a portal somewhere? Because some people that come back that are found, will give the most unusual stories. Like, I heard a sound off on the side of the path in the woods, and I took 2 steps off the path, looked around, couldn't find what was making the noise, turned back around to the path, and the path was gone. And I'm totally lost out in the woods for the next 3 days or whatever it is. So what in the world happened to them that in 2 steps they lost the path? So did they step into something? And is that the same mode of transportation that these possible Bigfoot are using?
And that's kind of, we're tracking there too, Mike, because there's of course the Skinwalker Ranch thing with the ranchers there before it was owned by everybody who investigated it. They have this whole story of this portal opening up and a Bigfoot creature coming out. And then what you're talking about really feels a lot like what David Paulides talks about, right? So his whole missing 411, people like toddlers disappearing and then ended up 13 miles away over an entire pass and mountain where you shouldn't be. Kid's not doing that, and then the kid's telling you that he was saved by a bear, and you're like, I don't know. That's a little.
This is when, to be honest, Mike, this is when kind of I started with Bigfoot in like 2011, started really getting into like that whole phenomenon. But it was the missing 411, the coast to coast stuff, when you started to realize there was actual scientific data that people are going from our reality to somewhere else possibly, because there's no explanation how these people end up missing. I started to take this whole topic serious, and you can't stay in the Bigfoot space for very long before you start realizing something else is going on entirely. And then obviously a lot of these guys are start talking about abductions, UFOs, and all the other things that go along with it. But it would make sense because people seem to, there's no bear involved, there's no animal involved, the trackers can't find these people. And that to me shifted my interest into actually like, from like sort of a hobby, kind of like this is what I want to think about and talk about and research for a long time. So it's cool. It's sad to talk about the missing people.
Yeah.
But it sure as heck makes it more of a, when you're having a conversation with your friends, like, guys, this is actually a thing. This is actually a problem. And people don't know where people are going. So you have to take this serious, that this is more than just some sort of conspiracy theory. People are actually going from our places to somewhere else, and we can't figure out why.
Right, exactly. All these different phenomena are connected, like you're talking about with the UFO abductions. And when we look into the past, it was of a different context. It wasn't Bigfoot, it wasn't UFOs, it was fairies. People were getting taken into the fairy realm and disappearing for long periods of time. And then when they would reappear, they would think it was 5-10 minutes, and it's like, no, you've been gone for days. Where did you go?
Yeah.
And they're like, I didn't go anywhere. I stepped over here, and that was it. So this is a phenomenon that's been occurring on our planet for you could track it back thousands of years. It's been happening for millennia.
And that seems like a good segue, Mike, because you've written extensively researched on the Alaskan Triangle, and that's what we were wanted to have you on initially. Maybe we'll have some future conversations, but initially just talk about that, because the idea of, as you're talking about things happening that are sort of paranormal, outside of the realm of normality, and in a certain place. We talk about the Bermuda Triangle is probably the most famous, and just because for whatever reason it's catchy, man. Everybody loves the tropics.
Yeah.
But there's a triangle in Alaska, and I think we forget. And this is what, having this conversation with this cop this last week. you forget how expansive and desolate this place is. Like sometimes I think, we lived in the lower 48, and you just think Alaska's big. Yeah. But, when this cop was telling us that his jurisdiction was the size of the state of Oregon, and there was 14,000 people that lived there and 20,000 workers that were transient as far as like oil workers. And you go, that's nutty. That's like a huge place and not a lot of people. And there's who knows what's going on out there. So start us off with the Alaska. You start wherever you want on this, but like if we're just a couple guys that don't know much about it other than like having seen. I've seen a couple things on docs about it on triangles in general, but you put the time in and researched all this. Right. So start us off and let us know what's going on up there.
And you're right. It is a very expansive area. I mean, you're talking about a location, the entire state, the population is right on par with the city of San Francisco, but the state, the size of it is 2.5 times the size of Texas. So, and of course, they're not all, spread out. There are some concentrated areas like Anchorage, Fairbanks, and some of the other smaller towns. But yeah, it's a really barren area. There are parts that have not been mapped out, so there are places that we don't know what's going on there. And there are even like some speculation that in some of those uncharted, unmapped areas, there may be remnants of the woolly mammoth and things like that. But yeah, when we talk about triangle areas, these things are all over the world. Bermuda is the most famous because back during the 1950s, people started piecing together all the strange things that had occurred there, basically the fallout from Flight 19. And as other things happened there and they started piecing together, there was this story and this thing happened, back in the early 1900s, even, Christopher Columbus had reports of strange things happening there. They noticed that it was kind of this triangular pattern within that area of the world. So they called it the Bermuda Triangle. But some of these places, been around, much longer, like the Dragon Sea out in Japan. Those stories go back to like 1000 BC, where the Chinese talked about there being dragons under the water because of all the strange phenomena that happened there. So it's really our current term for an area of high strangeness and bizarre occurrences that happen there. And Alaska, in this area that goes from Juneau to Anchorage all the way up to what used to be known as Barrow, but it's gone back to the native Inuit name, Yukiavik. There are so many bizarre things that happen there. And just to give us some context, that triangular area is about the size of the state of California. Wow. So it's a massive area, but between UFO sightings, missing people, paranormal activity, the cryptid sightings, there's just so many bizarre things that happen up there.
Yeah. What do you think just like the basic DNA of these triangles consists of?
Yeah, so basically what we're talking about, we have to take it all the way back down to the Earth's core. So it's this, molting, spinning ball of iron that creates a magnetic field, which is good for us because that magnetic field helps protect us from the solar wind. So like we just had all these auroras here lately, and that was basically the solar wind hitting our ionosphere. And that was the protection from our magnetic shield so that we wouldn't have gotten fried during those solar storms. So it's a good thing that we have this. But as it rises up through the Earth, through the crust, through the mantle, thin crust, it interacts with different metals and minerals. And depending on the types of metals and minerals it interacts with and the quantity, it's going to create different types of localized electromagnetic fields. So in these areas, we're having, there are some sort of significant deposits of something, some sort of metal or mineral that it's interacting with to create these other fields that these strange things happen. It'll interfere with people's guidance systems, compasses. It would have the ability to open up things like portals and cause all this other strange activity to happen. Alaska specifically, in the 1960s, the U.S. Department of the Interior did a geographic survey of the area, and it was only about 100,000 square miles, so basically like a sixth of the state, but it's still pretty significant because they identified 5 different magnetic characters throughout the region, and several of these they described as negative anomalies. So even the government's aware that there is strange magnetic activity in the area. And you couple that with, you have a lot of seismic activity in the area. There's a lot of earthquakes up there. I was up there for 6.7 when I spent 3 years there when I was in the Air Force. You have a lot of volcanic activity. I had just, when I got up there, experienced a 6.7 earthquake, which was a few months removed from the volcano Mount Spur that had gone off just before I got up there. So there's a lot of energy in both of those. And then again, the solar flares bombarding the area. At our poles, the magnetic shield is a little bit thinner. So you have all of that energy hitting that area as well. So I call Alaska just a fantastic cocktail of energies to make all this strange activity occur.
Yeah. So it's kind of like you think it starts in sort of the core of the earth, and then it kind of goes up, and then depending on the day, the time, the hour, or wherever, however things are kind of sort of the magic soup on the surface, you could walk into something. Obviously, you can't detect it, you can't see it, you don't know what's happening, but you think that is these triangles around the world, that it's a natural thing. It's not some alien base or something opening up portals constantly in these areas.
Right. It's more of a natural occurrence. Now, that said, on the alien or extraterrestrial notion, I mean, they may have established a base there in order to use that energy to maybe move in and about our world. Maybe they have figured out a way to
tap into it.
We know that portals open and close basically at random. Like when we talk the X points that are out there in space just off of our planet, and NASA's been up there for over a decade now trying to figure out some sort of pattern to why the X points of the portals that are out there, why do they open and close at these different random like intervals and strange sizes? So extraterrestrials that maybe far older than us have figured that out, and maybe they've harnessed it to be able to, maybe they're using wormholes to come in and out of our world, or there's a lot of different possibilities. That's a whole rabbit hole.
Yeah.
How long is this? So how long have folks been, and even the native folks there, been aware that this is an area that things occur? Are there like really old stories from the Inuit and the Eskimos and those folks up there that talk about this area being weird?
Yeah, the natives, the Inuit and the Tlingit, they have all kinds of interesting legends and lore associated with the strange activity that occurs up there. And a lot of times with this type of activity, we were talking Sasquatch earlier, they have these different creatures that'll move in and out of these different dimensions. So the Irchinhat, which are basically like the little people, or the Kushtaka, which is the kind of quote unquote outer man, which is really similar to almost like the Wendigo legends that we have around the Great Lakes area. And what's interesting about the Irchinhat is this was not that long ago. I think it was 2006. It was reported in the Anchorage Daily News, so legit newspaper. There was a boy that was discovered by a bunch of hunters. They were kind of going out into this area by Pilcher Mountain, and they just found this boy kind of standing out there in the middle of nowhere. There was still snow on the ground, and there were no tracks around him. And they're kind of, okay, what are you doing out here? What happened that you're out here on your own? And the boy told this fantastic story about how he had been taken inside the mountain by these little people. And the way he described them sounded like these Irchinhat that the natives have been talking about for centuries. Right. And he said that he was left there by them with this little girl, and apparently the little girl had been inside the mountain with the Irchinhat for like 40 years. She hadn't aged at all. The Irchinhat eventually let the boy go, and they basically dumped him right there on the side of the mountain or at the base of the mountain. And a truly fascinating story about how, it almost seems like he was taken into some sort of dimension where time didn't exist by these little beings that are up there. And it's exactly the stories that the natives would tell.
Dude, how do you think that, could they be in some sort of area where that's affected by gravity and time is slowing down? Because it seems as though, these UFOs have this ability, right? They manipulate gravity. And every time someone is involved with one, there's a time slippage, there's a time differential, there's a time issue. And so maybe there's pockets in the world where gravity behaves differently, and it's It's like the fountain of youth, but you don't even know you're drinking it, you know?
Well, there certainly are areas where gravity works differently. When we talk about, there's different mountain phenomena where there's a phenomenon called a gravity wave. You get a little bit too, like you're flying an airplane through like a mountain pass. You get a little too close, it'll kind of like grab you and bring you closer to the mountain. So there are things like that. But when we're talking these type of things, like the Irchin Hot or UFOs, so a lot of these type of beings, have the ability to move in and out of dimensions. And I think what's happening here with a lot of like these UFO abductions where people talk about experiencing time in a different way, or they have a time loss incident and that sort of thing. I think what's happening is that when they're taken into that realm, maybe it's the mothership, or the Irchin Hot, it was pulled into a mountain. Fairy lore from 150 years ago, we're in the fairy realm and off with them. I really think it's another dimension that they are being brought into. And if that's true, and that is a dimension that is above ours, because our consciousness is in the fourth dimension that we call time. Time doesn't really exist, but that we'll probably get to that at some point in the interview. Other beings in other dimensions, 5, 6, 7, 8, and onward, they're outside of time. They would see time as like one whole concurrent object. So if you're taken to another dimension that is outside the scope of time, sure, our what we believe is time, description of our reality and how we keep track of things, that's going to work and operate very differently in those other realms and those other dimensions. So being brought back here, conceptually, it's going to be mind-boggling to us. Like, it seems like I was just there for 5 minutes, and here, 3 days have gone by, or whatever it is. You take like Travis Walton. He thought he had returned the same night. It'd been 5 days later. So things like that occur, and I think it's really because they're being brought into another dimension.
Yeah, which is, I guess it's hard to understand what a dimension, is in terms, just in conversation. It's like, is it it's like the upside down? Is it some kind of alternate world? And sometimes I just like to explain it as if it was happening in our dimension, because it seems to make sense to me more than just like these alternate parallel universes kind of existing with us at the same time. Because it seems as though the craft are here and then they're not here. And then Bigfoot is here and he seems to be leaving footprints here. And then it doesn't make any sense. Is it like, are they just using some sort of frequency technology to appear like they're not here, but they're still here? And I think that's a lot of the debate that goes on in my head. Are they still there, but you just can't see them?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's a difference between accessing another dimension and taking a wormhole to some other place in the cosmos. They are still around us, just we can't perceive them because we don't have the physical geometry to be able to perceive that. So here's an example. And I actually use this in my book, Travels Through Time. So great story from years ago about the Flatlanders. Basically a two-dimensional race of beings. So in this flatland, everything is just in two-dimensional space. Okay, so think of like a tabletop or
piece of paper. I've heard like a piece of paper.
Yeah, piece of paper. Now that's all that they can perceive, or squares, circles, triangles, that sort of stuff. Now take a three-dimensional sphere and drop that into their world. Just kind of have it pass through that piece of paper, that tabletop, or whatever. They are not going to be able to perceive that entire sphere because they are two-dimensional. So they don't have the physical geometry to see the whole three-dimensional object. But as it drops through their world, basically what they would see is like a circle kind of slowly open up, until it gets to its apex, the full circumference of that. And then as it continued to pass through, it would shrink back down. So they would only be able to perceive a circle from the entire sphere. So that is kind of what's happening here, is we are getting a glimpse of whether it's some sort of strange looking being or creature, or some sort of craft. We're just getting a glimpse of something else that's going on that is beyond what our three-dimensional physical body, the way our eyes work and our physiology, we're only getting a glimpse. There's so much more going on beyond us that's amazing.
Mike, so back to that story, the story about the little boy. Was there any evidence of a missing girl in that area 40 years earlier, like where they could draw? I mean, because it ended up in
Yeah, that's a great question, and I didn't dive down.
That would be
rabbit
fascinating
hole.
if there's
Yeah, it would be. Yeah, and I mean, there's plenty of missing people
Right.
in Alaska. Of course, it's bizarre how many people go missing. So yeah, and that specific article, it didn't follow up on that. That would be great additional research to do to see if is there a girl from 40 years ago that matches that?
Who's living in the mountain
Yeah.
with the little people? There's
supposedly a plane flight that like left in the 60s and landed in like the 90s or something. Did you hear about that, Luke? I don't know if you heard that story.
It sounds like
heard about that, Mike?
Sounds like Lost or something.
Not that specifically. I mean, there's been a lot of missing airplanes up in Alaska. Some really high profile ones.
Well, so yeah,
too.
I was going to ask, what are some of the major, the biggest and most significant, craziest major stories have come out of the Alaskan Triangle? And
the biggest missing airplane one would be Hale Boggs and Nick Begich back in 1972. That was Boggs was the House Majority Leader at the time, and as they were passing through the Portage Pass, going from Anchorage to Juneau, just gone. They have no idea what happened to it. To this day, they have found nothing of that airplane. And, there have been several airplanes that have gone down throughout the Portage Pass and plenty of wreckage there to sift through, and they have never found a thing of that airplane. They very high profile case, biggest search and rescue mission in the United States up to that point in our history. They were utilizing spy planes, not a thing, just disappeared. Another one, 1950, it was a Douglas Skymaster, very large airplane, 44 people on board that. And as they had just crossed over the Canadian border around the Snag area, they just lost contact. And they had the U.S. military and the Canadian military doing joint operations at the time. So they pulled everybody off of those joint operations, had them out there looking for it. And again, nothing. And what's bizarre about that is it's like a week or two later, there was a smaller plane that went down around that same area where they lost contact with the Skymaster. They found that, boom, right away. But the big, huge Skymaster, not a thing, even still to this day. And there are some other interesting phenomena that happened at that time, like right before and right after that plane went missing, there were UFO sightings.
Right.
So it's like, okay, is there some sort of relationship there?
I've got a lot of grandbabies, like a lot. And when it comes to finding a gift for each of them, it could add up. But this year, while I was making my way through Walmart, I realized I don't have to spend a lot to get the gifts they'll love.
An OPI mini Manny set. I'm gonna do so much nail art.
Oh, yeah! A Lego set. Might own a Walla water bottle.
Ooh, and that's just half of them.
Shop great gifts they're sure to love for $25 and under at Walmart.
Yeah. Do you think that they're going through some kind of wormhole where they survive when they go through it?
Well, that's one of the working theories. And we, on the Alaska Triangle television show, we did postulate that idea. And that's as far as we took it on the show was, they could have passed through some sort of portal. And we, got Bruce Gernon from his experience down in the Bermuda Triangle to talk about, his experience of essentially, passing through a portal, what he called an electronic.
Yeah. I actually talked to Bruce at one point.
Okay.
And he said that he 45 minutes early, he got into Miami.
Yeah. It was totally bizarre. So he had some sort of, you could chalk that up as a time travel incident because he zoomed ahead in time, like 45 minutes. Yeah. Which is really fascinating. So that's in my book, Alaska's Mysterious Triangle. I took it a step further and asked the question, okay, so if they did pass through a portal and went to, say, another point in time, you could say they went to another dimension. You could say they went to somewhere else in the cosmos. But I liked using the idea of time. So let's say they went to somewhere else in time. Okay, where did they go in time? Well, they could have gone forward. They could have gone backward. So let's just say they went backwards in time. Just throwing out a hypothesis here. And we'll just throw an arbitrary number at it. Let's say they went back 500 years. Okay, so 500 years ago to the indigenous people of the area at the time, what would an airplane look like to them? A big Douglas Skymaster. They would have no context whatsoever of an airplane 500 years ago. To them, it would be some huge, massive, large winged
like a Thunderbird
bird,
or something.
Very
right?
loud and thunderous in nature.
Yeah.
Exactly. So is this where some of the Thunderbird legends come from?
That's interesting.
Maybe.
That's an interesting idea.
Yeah, it makes you think. Makes you think. Yeah.
So this triangle, it's a pretty big area. How do you put the points on the map, I guess, is what you're saying? 'Cause it's such a massive area as I'm looking at it.
Yeah, it becomes difficult because it is such a widespread area. I really no way to search it all, right? And some of those places are really remote, really desolate. The only way you can get in there is through, grab yourself a bush pilot and we'll head out there and fingers crossed you make it back, right? When we did the show, one of the stories was about Mount Hayes and the possibilities of there being a base hidden within Mount Hayes where extraterrestrials and the U.S. military are working together. So there's no road that goes there. It's too far to hike. So they put James Fox in a plane with a bush pilot and took him out there and they landed on the glacier. It's crazy.
Wow. Yeah.
It's very hard to research it all up there.
David Paulides talks about in his last film, there's like some underground water associated with some of these missing places. Is there anything underground? Is there any like layer of maybe aquifers or anything in that area of Alaska by any chance?
Well, yeah. I mean, what's interesting about Alaska, so, okay, we talk about Minnesota being the land of 10,000 lakes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alaska has 3 million.
Yeah.
Jeez. 3 million lakes?
So 3 million lakes.
Jeez.
Yeah. So there's a lot of water. Yeah. And that is of a certain size. And I forget the dimension that they have to be to fall within that 3 million, but it's pretty significant. So there's much, even smaller.
And Uncle Ricky knows where to catch the best fish.
The fish up there is amazing.
And he won't tell anybody.
Those salmon up there are like as big as the table that I'm at right now. They're huge.
Yeah.
No, they're really good. Yeah. So there's a lot of water that's up there under those glaciers. Who knows what's under many of those, right? So there's a lot of secret areas up there. So if we're talking like USOs, they could be hiding in any of those lakes up there. And it would make sense too. Really remote, hidden, even the coastline. The coastline of Alaska is larger than if you combine the east and west coast of America, of the lower 48.
Dang.
People just don't realize how massive it is up there. So there's plenty of places for things to hide.
Yeah.
Since 1970, they say like 20,000 people have gone missing or disappeared in this particular region.
Yeah, we use the statistic 16,000 from 1988.
Okay.
So if it's 20,000 from 77, I mean, it's fine. Yeah, it's just an astronomical number. And sure, I mean, plenty of people went out into the woods and got eaten by a bear or gored by a moose, and we're not going to know what happened to them. Or, there's kidnappings and things like that. Sure, those things occur, unfortunately, but it's 16,000. Again, you think of the population now as, about the size of the city of San Francisco, and it would have been smaller, of course, back in like 1988. It's just an astronomical number compared to the entire population. The percentage is huge.
How many people come back?
Yeah.
A handful. I mean, people do come back. They have some bizarre tales, like we were talking about earlier. Hey, I stepped off the path, and all of a sudden, the path was gone. One of the stranger tales was 2012, the Mount Marathon race in Seward, Alaska. So this is a race with a lot of people. They're up and down the mountain, and one of the runners, Michael LeMaitre, just disappeared, gone. Just nowhere to be found. And they sent people to go out and look for him, and he totally disappeared from a race. It was a very public event. How does that happen?
I mean, that's the question, right? That's why I think you when you hit on portals and and you talk about the electromagnetic activity. We had a recent episode, an interview with Ashton Forbes, who's the one he's the guy that's investigating the disappearance of MH370, in the citizen journalism space, and they've got some crazy satellite videos of what he believes are man-made orbs. These are technology that are opening up portal spaces, and it appears to disappear this flight. That's been his conclusion based upon the verification of all the data and all that kind of stuff. So the fact that these things apparently can be recreated is terrifying in and of itself. But the idea these things happen naturally occurring is really scary too. I mean, there's stories like Mount Shasta where hikers and footprints just go into nowhere, and then they're not in a crevasse. They didn't fall off a cliff. They just
definitely at certain elevations, it seems like people can up their chances of getting disappeared the higher they go. I don't know why that is.
Yeah, and some of those stories are fascinating too. Yeah, there's footprints on the path, and then they're just gone. I can see the steps, and it's amazing. And okay, to your point about is it man-made? They are in the lab. It was about 1.5 years ago. They admitted, we have created a baby wormhole in the lab in the quantum environment. And part of it was kind of funny because the reporters talking to the scientists asked, well, can you send something like a dog through the portal? And it's like, why do we immediately go to putting a dog through this wormhole? Right? It was very, very small. They had sent messages through it. Nothing big enough for a person or a living creature. And my thing is, why would we not send a probe through first? Why would we send a dog?
Or a monkey, just like the space program. Send the monkey through. Get the monkeys going.
Right, like him. Yeah. But so they are developing these things in the lab. And so we're going to start seeing more and more of that as we progress further. Hopefully they don't suck the entire planet through a wormhole somewhere that they create in the lab. But these are things that we have to start considering now that, yes, they can occur naturally, but what are we as humans up to as well that we're going to start, testing out there, and we have to ask that question too, because our military has done it to us in the past. If they discover some way to, open a portal or a wormhole, are they going to test it on the innocent civilians?
Or even tell us about it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mike, what are your thoughts on where people go? Where do you think they go? They go to someplace else here, or they go someplace else in the cosmos? Or
I think both can happen. When we look at Einstein-Rosen bridge, our traditional wormhole, that can link to other places in the cosmos. I think they could also be sent to another place on Earth. The research that I've been doing on stargates, I don't just believe that the ancients had Stargate technology to take them to some other place in the cosmos. I believe that they were able to travel across the world. We see, a lot of our ancient cultures, so many similarities. How did they, according to our traditional archaeology, they weren't supposed to have had contact with each other. But you look at Chichen Itza, look at the Step Pyramid there in Egypt, you're kind of scratching your head. What in the world there? You go to Elephantine Island, and there's a depiction of somebody there in a Mayan headdress, and it's like, where did that come from? And up the hill from there is an alleged Stargate. So were they using the Stargate to travel to these other places on Earth and share knowledge and technology? So it could be, and that's of the physical realm. Well, you could also be talking about, some other dimension. Were they passing into fifth, sixth, seventh dimension and beyond? Are they getting to these other places where time doesn't really exist as we know it, like we were talking about earlier?
Yeah.
And what do you think? Do you think they were creating this like from ancient technology, or do you think they were harnessing like things that already existed in the same way that you were explaining the Alaska Triangle, where you have, as far as our government is concerned, there's at least 5 nodes or whatever you want to call them in this space that are
right.
High electromagnetic energy. That I think they discovered like these places and utilized them, or do you think that they were able to kind of create the technology? I mean, it's not the one, we don't know the answer to that, but what do you prognosticate on that?
Yeah. I believe that as far as the ancients were concerned, they had found these different power places on Earth. When we look at where the pyramids are built, Stonehenge, other what we call ancient sites of power, they were built on these hotspot nodes of energy. So they had a methodology to be able to detect and find these locations, and then basically harness that power for a variety of means. And not just travel, but a lot of these places are, locations that are supposed to be of great healing, or entering into altered states of consciousness, or we're having some sort of ritual here because of the alignment of the stars, or whatever it is. But I believe that they were able to also traverse the cosmos, or even our planet, at these locations or into other dimensions. And I believe our government has figured that out as well. There are certain segments of it. When it comes to Alaska specifically, I believe that's why they built HAARP up there, because of they knew, okay, these different electromagnetic anomalies are up here, so let's go ahead and utilize them, and we'll harness them, and we'll start playing around with the ionosphere. Yeah.
Is there any data to suggest that, like in the Missing 401 docs, he talks a lot about how there's evidence that kind of is found later. There's like clothes that are folded and all sorts of weird things. Is there anything like that going up on in Alaska where there could be some natural wormholes people fly through and they just can't get back. It's like, oops, went
Right,
through that.
yeah.
But there could be some evidence to suggest that it is more nefarious. There is entities messing and taking people. Is there any like weird clues and stuff that's kind of puzzled, like search and rescue, that we found this thing miles away, kind of any of that data?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you do find, like an out of place artifact, or somebody's, like you said, somebody's clothes, things like that. Okay, here's a part of the trail, but where did they go? That sort of thing happens. And then there are people that come forward too. There was I want to say it was about 8 or 10 years ago, there was an individual that came forward in Alaska. He was basically confessing about being involved in some different organized crime up there, as well as further down, I think, if I recall correctly, in the Vegas area. But he had connections across the country, and he was doing some of these things up there in Alaska. And so he had reported on a story that he was basically charged with simply taking this briefcase and putting it on a plane. Now, he wasn't told what was in the briefcase, and he wasn't specifically told the plane at the time, but he put 2 and 2 together when all of a sudden the Boggs Begich plane went missing. Like, oh, that was because they're showing photos of it and all this sort of thing. He's like, oh, that was the plane that I put the briefcase on. So he was basically confessing this to the Anchorage police or something like this. And there's an actual FBI report on it, because of course it involved Boggs and Begich. And he started speculating. He's like, I don't know what was in the briefcase. I don't know if it was like maybe it was a bomb or something that exploded the plane, but there was no follow-up on it. The family wanted some follow-up. Okay, here's a story. Here's a guy confessing that he put this thing on the plane. What was it? What did it do? Did it was it sabotage? That sort of thing. But they never reinvigorated that investigation. They never picked it back up because they said, hey, we've been in and around that Portage Pass for decades, for the last 40 years, finding other planes that had gone down and this sort of thing. But there is no evidence whatsoever of an explosion taking place and a debris field or anything like that. We have never found a thing. So they didn't restart the investigation, which is still kind of unusual. Yeah. Right. But that's a story that's come out of there since then.
You think they put some sort of technology in there that would maybe activate whatever happened? I mean, that's a lot of speculation, but it's kind of odd, right? The conspiracy theorist in me is like, well, they didn't chase this down because there's something there that they don't want people to find.
Right. And there's a couple of different things if you want to go down the conspiracy route. So at that time, you had a lot of interesting international politics going on between, I think that was the second incarnation of Yugoslavia, and Boggs had a lot of Croatian ties. So it's like, okay, was there some sort of dissent there, some sort of party that wanted to be rid of him? Or Boggs had also dissented against the Warren Commission, which was the ruling body on the Kennedy assassination. And so was it somebody from there? So there's a lot of different roads we could go down.
Yeah. Dude, I love that kind of stuff though. It spawns conspiracies because it feels like a derelict in duty. Like if this story is true, maybe they behind the scenes they decided this guy was just full of it, and maybe that there wasn't anything to it. But the same measure, it feels a lot like they just don't look over here. We're just not gonna. Which is fascinating because when you mention HAARP is there now, it just makes you question what's happening in this region, right? The natural stuff aside, that what's operationally going on in that region that that we're not supposed to really know about potentially.
Yeah, so HAARP is interesting because they installed that in early to mid 90s. Actually, while I was there, I think it was 93 they started on that. So that was run by the U.S. government, and it no longer is run by the government. They shut it down about 10 years ago, and then they gave it to the university. So the university is using it now. But I think whatever they had learned there with HAARP, the government got what they wanted out of it. And I think that, because think about the way technology works, right? How did our computers look, back in 1993?
Awesome. They
right?
looked really awesome. Massive. Played Oregon Trail on them in high school. It was amazing. It was green screen, Oregon Trail.
Oregon Trail. There you go. A lot of the big mainframes that I worked on, these huge cabinets and stuff like that. Everything is shrunk back down. So that HAARP technology over the 20 years that they were working on that research. I imagine they have shrunk down that technology. And I mean, you think about the whole complex of HAARP is, really huge. But, these days you could be driving around in a van with it.
That's scary. That's a scary
or
thought.
Maybe they've
too.
shrunk it down even more, and it's in a briefcase.
Used to be like Doc Brown in the Old West making an ice cube. He had that giant
right,
machine.
Exactly.
And now it's just like this little tiny thing. We can do it. Are there any undiscovered megaliths up there, you think? Things that kind of the ancients knew about this?
So we mentioned a little bit about the Black Pyramid. Yeah. We don't know whether it truly exists. We have the stories that have come out of there. One of the problems with megaliths in Alaska is a lot of things are buried under ice, that sort of stuff. Glaciers kind of get in the way. So that's an issue. But there is an object called the Sphinx of Ophir, which during the Iditarod races, they pass right by it all the time. And so, it could be a natural formation, or it could have been a man-made formation that over time has been weathered down, but they call it a sphinx. And so it is kind of an interesting formation. So it's possible. But
do you think? What's your opinion? Do you think there's stuff? Because there's all these Google Earth people that pull up and say there's pyramids in Antarctica, right? They're like, this is just too geometrically. You think that kind of stuff exists underneath the ice cap and stuff? And
so that's interesting. So the Antarctica stuff is truly fascinating, and yeah, I've seen that, and I actually used that example in the book. If that is a pyramid, it would be an absolutely huge pyramid, because we're talking, it's like, 1,000 feet tall at least. So it would be massive. Mm-hmm. But I don't think totally out of the question, because Antarctica wasn't always there at the South Pole. It was in other parts of the globe, and when they've done the core samples, they've found ancient jungles under there. So, all these different parts of the world had once been connected to each other. And so I do believe that there is an ancient civilization that was there, whether or not they built a huge pyramid. I mean, it just looks so uncannily like a perfect pyramid. But yeah, I believe that there's hidden technology under the ice. And that's one of the reasons why, Hitler made his way all the way down there, or at least the Nazis under Hitler's orders, to find, possible hidden technology that was down there from ancient civilizations. He was really, really big on let's find all the power pieces. So, if you talk about some of these ancient civilizations, like ancient Egyptians, or, predating that, the Atlantean civilization, which was not just a city, it was worldwide. Well, did they have a colony there on what we would call Antarctica? And, is possibly under the ice some of their technology that was used to build these pyramidal structures, which I think was more of like an anti-gravity technology. I mean, we're kind of speculating here, but I believe it's possible.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like, to check you have the tickets in your wallet first before you drive 2 hours to the big game. Seriously, you had one job. Now the closest you'll get to the 50-yard line is parking lot D. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
Yeah, I love that kind of stuff, because it's just there's so much mystery, and you do realize that, like, the climate's changed. We go from ice age to not an ice age, and you have these things that are hidden. And it's fun to think about, at the least. Who knows? And you're right. There's that part of the world, especially, it sort of garners a lot of really interesting attention from some nefarious characters. And then also, if you want to go with government being nefarious, the governments as well are very interested in whatever's happening, at the South Pole, which is which is super wild.
It's been for a long, long time. Yeah, and it's not like you can go tour there.
No,
right?
Yeah,
you have to get special permission to be there. So yeah. So what's going on?
And I think now we have this new technology. They're discovering all these ancient civilizations all in places where the vegetation has grown over. Mm-hmm. Using LiDAR and other things, like, there was this massive site here, and one of our good friends, Derek Olson, was talking about how they're in Brazil. There's all these pyramids that they're finding.
Yeah,
and there's all this evidence for it. So it's almost like we're rediscovering how vast the ancient societies actually were and where they were. They're saying, there's megaliths in Montana, which isn't. And I don't know. Some of those things actually look natural. It's really difficult. The debate sort of rages on, but it seems as though there was an ancient race and we would say on our show that there was giants that were building a lot of things alongside humankind, and that's where we get all the giant lore, is because they seem to have some sort of understanding of how to build things. But there's evidence of mounds and pyramids all over the world, and I was just wondering if Alaska had. You would think that somehow they knew where to build these pyramids, and so they seem to have built them on top of energy places that had a lot of energy. I don't think they just randomly, well, this looks like a good spot.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And Alaska they have their own giant stories too.
Yeah.
There was a guy, Michael Kazanuk, this was back in the 1930s, and I had tracked down this document, 500 pages of handwritten legends and lore from the Inuit culture, because he realized that a lot of the stories were being lost, and he wanted to make sure that these things were captured and not forgotten. And it's broken English. It's a little hard to make your way through it, but many stories of giants coming over from Siberia. So basically, across the land bridge, which makes sense. And I kind of look at that as giants from Siberia. So are these related to like the Denisovans, or because the Denisovans were supposed to be very large in stature. So okay, there's a possibility there. But then as he starts talking about these giants, he's talking about them mating with the human women and creating these other types of giant hybrids. This is in the Inuit lore. I'm like scratching my head, like, wait a minute. This is eerily familiar to like the story we have of the Nephilim mating with the human women. It's like, how in the world did this story that we consider biblical, Middle Eastern, how did that make its way all the way up to Alaska in these giant tales? So you see these different connections like this, and it's just, to me, that stuff is amazing.
I mean, I think that people still see them up in Canada, apparently. They come out of the ground. And then you have all these like TikTokers trying to find their like doorways and mountains and things.
Right.
And if you're going to hide, if you're going to be a giant, I'd go to Alaska. Seems like you could have a good life in Alaska. It's like the tropics for giants up there. Yeah. Just retire and hang out.
Yeah, and I believe that they existed at different points in our history.
Sure.
And, you find, okay, there's all the stories about the Smithsonian hiding things, that was certainly a policy of theirs. Anything that they dubbed pre-Columbian, they just destroyed or they hid away.
It's like Indiana Jones, man. They started just put it down in the warehouse, just put it all the way, take the ark all the way down and hide it in all the rest of the boxes somewhere.
Mike, have you talked to the boneyard guys up in Alaska, doing the boneyard stuff? They're always
I have not.
Fun. Okay,
it's interesting though. Yeah,
everyone's always telling us to interview those guys. I don't know anything about them, but I know that they just finding all these bones, and I'm wondering if they found anything that would get them in trouble.
Yeah, you never know. And there's been plenty of stuff up there, giant heads that have been found up there, cataloged at the Smithsonian, and they go missing, so you can't even study them. Yeah, it's unfortunate.
What particularly drew you to that area? Like, why did you feel like you needed to write a book?
Well, I spent 3 years there when I was in the Air Force for one. Yeah, and it's interesting because I never really thought that I would re-explore that area the way that I have. I mean, I had some experiences up there. There was different things that I came to know during my time there. But really, what inspired me was getting tapped for the Alaska Triangle television show. That production company had found me through a totally unrelated video to Alaska, but it was the type of material that I was talking about on YouTube, which had to do with the relationship between energetic places on Earth, ley lines, and paranormal, supernatural activity. And it was actually not a very widely watched video. It didn't get a lot of views, but they found that. And they were like, okay, we want to talk to this guy about Earth energy. So we got on a call, and we're just, chatting back and forth, about Earth energy and different phenomena and all that sort of stuff. And, they asked me, so what do you know about this sort of stuff happening in Alaska? And I said, well, I spent 3 years in Alaska when I was in the Air Force, and people talked about the Alaska Triangle. And they said, that's the name of our show. Like, oh, great. So it was like a perfect fit. So yeah, I worked on the show, did some episodes with them, and that inspired me to, okay, this is interesting. I started, remembering some of my stories from when I'd been up there, and I dove deeper into the research. So I have to say, it was a television show that inspired me to write that book.
What do you think's like the number one story that's stuck with you all these years? Maybe you've already talked about it, but the one that kind of rattles your brain.
Oh, that happened up there?
Yeah.
I mean, a couple of different things. One, kind of like one of the more bizarre things that occurred while I was up there. It was April 1993, and it was an airplane taking off from the Anchorage airport. And all of a sudden, and it was passing over just one of the engines fell right off of the thing and landed in a supermarket parking lot. Just boom. Fortunately, nobody was hurt. And I can't imagine if you're out there wheeling your groceries and all of a sudden this plane engine lands in the backside of the parking lot. But nobody was back there. Some of the shrapnel kind of rained down into the local neighborhoods. People reported they would walk into their bedrooms and find plain shrapnel like sticking in the floor of the room. And somehow nobody got hurt. It was bizarre. So they blamed it on some sort of structural failure or whatever, but it's like it's these sort of strange things that happen up there in Alaska.
Yeah, how does an airplane engine just fall off of a plane?
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't seem so implausible now with what's going on with Boeing and everything else.
Well, yeah. Somebody was asking me the other day, how do you feel about flying? Because I do a lot of flying. It's like, well, the percentage is really, really low. I mean, there's a handful of things that have happened here, but do you know how many flights go out every single day? It's just, the percentage is really, really low. But
no helicopters in Iran.
No. The other significant memories from Alaska, well, of course, there are auroras. Those are absolutely beautiful. What we had here the other week doesn't even compare to what we saw up there. But the building that I worked at the last 2 years, I had to wait a year for my security clearance to come in. And then I worked for 2 years in essentially the basement of the Alaska Command Building. I was working for, at that point, it was called Worldwide Military Command and Control Systems, which is now Global Command and Control Systems. So working at different communications devices for command, for the different officers and command centers to issue communications between each other. So that was in the basement of the Alaska Command Building. We shared space with the communications center down there. And people routinely reported, and I saw it several times myself, what we would call shadow people. And these things would move in and about the office space, mostly kind of the cubicle area. And then sometimes we'd see them dart into what we called the rack room, because there were all these different like patch panels, multiplexers up on these racks, crypto devices, stuff like that. And then every once in a while, there was a back room behind everything where some old printers were. And sometimes we see stuff dart in there. So these were reported by many of us. In fact, when I first met my supervisor, it's kind of interesting. He was on some temporary assignment, or maybe he was on vacation or whatever, the first week that I was there. And so I'm kind of getting to know the guys. And I was already seeing some stuff. Like, okay, what was that? Because you'd see something kind of like dart down the hall or, peek its head around. Okay, what's going on? So my supervisor's finally there. I'm sitting in his office. He has his door open. We're just getting to know each other. And all of a sudden, there was like this shadow that walked right by. And I saw it. And he noticed that I noticed it. And he just said, yeah, sometimes that happens.
That's crazy.
Here. He just left it at that. It's like, okay. So what was interesting is that people talked about the reason why this was happening. And we never took this up the chain of command or anything, because they would have dubbed us crazy and would have been sent to mental health, and we would have lost our security clearances. So we just kind of talked about it amongst ourselves, might have mentioned something to our supervisor. We're not taking it up the chain. So in those conversations, there was a story that was going around that the reason why it was happening was because that the building had originally been a hospital, and that we were in the morgue of that hospital, where the rack room had been where they kept the coolers and everything. And I was like, okay, sure, that makes sense. These are the souls of the people who had passed away. And that story stuck in my head for all of those years. So when I started doing research for Alaska's Mysterious Triangle, and I want to write about this, of course, so I dive into the research of the building because I want to get all my facts straight and all my ducks in a row and everything. And I'd come to find out that building was never a hospital. It was built exactly what it was being used for, and that was command. So then it's like, okay, I'm scratching my head. Why in the world are we seeing these shadows down there? Yeah. And so I can only speculate now. And of course, I can't go back and investigate and research because they'd never let me in there these days. But I'd love to. But again, we're talking energy of the Alaska Triangle, and then we're talking about everything else that's there as far as energy and equipment and all that. I think we were witnessing some sort of time slip, that we were seeing, shadows of personnel from the past, maybe personnel from the future, maybe even ourselves, this sort of thing.
Wow.
There's no other rhyme or reason for these things to have been there. So, yeah.
Time is bizarre. It's
Starbucks iced apple crisp oat milk shaken espresso. Made with blonde espresso, creamy oat milk, and spiced apple flavors. It's an icy crisp sip you can enjoy all autumn long. Order ahead on the Starbucks app.
It's the weirdest part of kind of what we get into. It's like, trying to make sense of just if a creature exists, then all of a sudden, when does the creature exist is a whole nother rabbit hole of going down. So, I mean, I guess, Mike, if you're in Alaska, you see a portal open up and you're in the woods, do you walk in it? Or do you give it the peace sign and turn around? What do you do?
I'd leave a note first and say, hey, I found this. This is what I'm doing. I'm walking through. I'll let you know what happens on the other side if I make it.
See you on the other
I
side.
would be I would totally do it, but I would leave a note first.
Sounds like Arrested Development. It's Arrested Development. Always leave a note. Mike, I think my last question for you would be: you talked a lot about cryptids and creatures. Is there a specific the little people? We actually, this is the second time we've heard, at least the second time we've heard about the little people lore from Alaska. But is there another cryptid or sort of creature that has a lot of run, if you will, or a lot of lore around it in the triangle, besides the little people?
Yeah, the Kushtaka be the other one, the Otter Man, which is kind of like the Wendigo legends. So these things, half man, half otter. When we see interpretations of it, very, very bizarre looking. And what they do is they hang out in the woods and they will lure people out into the woods with these different cries and calls that sound very human in nature, and people will go out into the woods to see what's going on. And the Kushtaka will either eat the person, attack them, kill them, eat them, or they will turn them into another Kushtaka. Which is, again, kind of very similar to the Wendigo type legends, but it's of this half man, half otter type of a form.
Otter Man.
Otter Man.
Does he sleep holding hands with the other otter men, or do they?
Maybe, or the otter women. Maybe.
Oh, the otter women. Yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
Oh, Mike, I love this conversation. I know there's so much more because you've written on time travel and you've written a book on shadow people. I feel like we could open up a couple cans here and be here for a few hours. But man, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah.
And can you share with our audience where they can find you, find your books, find the stuff you're working on?
Yeah, absolutely.
Podcasts.
Yeah, well, podcast is Connecting the Universe. That's every Wednesday night, 8:00 p.m. My website is MikeRicksecker.com. I also have a membership site, which is ConnectedUniversePortal.com. So it's like-minded people come together. We discuss a lot of these topics, and I have a ton of video content that is back behind the scenes there. And then I also have my Connected Universe blog. That's up there now. I've been running that a few months now, and I've really enjoyed that because it's another outlet for my writing. So yeah, you can find me in a lot of different places.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Really appreciate you
Mike, thanks
coming
so
on.
much. Yeah, dude,
thank you both so much.
We'll have to have you back if you enjoyed the experience, and
anytime.
Thanks again.
Alaska's big. It takes a few episodes,
Absolutely. So yeah, anytime you want me back, I
appreciate it, Mike.
Really be happy to.
Yeah. And if we don't hear from you, we'll assume that you left a note and that you've gone elsewhere.
That's right.
So Godspeed, man.
That's right. Take a GPS with you on that plane flight.
Yeah.
You go go back up there.
Let us know. Yeah.
So we know where you are.
Will do.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Mike.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you.